You know, the halls of power are supposed to be for debate, but sometimes they feel more like a boxing ring. And this week in Sri Lanka's parliament, it was definitely one of those times. The main event was this huge fight over pensions, but that just opened the door to even bigger questions about national security and the economy. So let's break down how one single bill turned into a major test of government accountability.
Okay, so let me start by asking you a question, one that gets argued about in governments all over the world. Should politicians get a pension after they're done with their term? It sounds like a simple question, but man, the answers are really complicated.
Well, over in Sri Lanka, this exact question became the flashpoint for a massive political battle. It really set the government and the opposition on a collision course in a pretty high-stakes showdown.
All right, first up, let's get to the heart of it, this big battle over pensions. It all kicked off with what seemed like a simple proposal from the government, but it didn't take long for it to ignite the whole week's drama.
So, the government fired the first shot, you could say. They put forward an official bill, and its goal was crystal clear, to completely get rid of pensions for members of parliament. It was a bold move, and you could definitely say a populist one.
And wow, the reaction was immediate. The main opposition party, the 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗬𝗏𝗧, got together and decided they were going to formally oppose this thing. Just like that, the battle lines were officially drawn.
So, with both sides refusing to budge, the fight spilled onto the parliamentary floor. Let's really get into the core arguments that each side was making to try and win their case.
So, you've got the government on one side, pushing hard to just repeal the pensions completely. And on the other side, you have the opposition arguing just as passionately to keep them. Let's break down their thinking.
So the main argument from the leader of the opposition was basically this. Pensions aren't just some nice perk, they're actually a tool to fight corruption. The thinking goes that if you give representatives some financial security after they leave office, they'll be less tempted to, enrich themselves while they're in office.
But they didn't just stop there. Nope, they dug into the history books. They pointed out that this whole pension system was actually first requested by this really revered figure, Dr. 𝗦𝗦𝗕𝗏 who's known as the father of free education. They argued that the original point was to make sure people from any background could serve without worrying about financial ruin if they lost an election. I mean, it makes sense, right? A lot of these folks have to leave other professional careers to even go into politics.
Then the opposition pulled a classic political move. They pivoted and asked, hey, why is the government so obsessed with the pensions of a few hundred MPs when, and this is their claim, it hasn't done anything about pension problems for 750,000 retired public servants? It's a smart tactic, right? You widen the debate and try to point out what you see as hypocrisy.
And another angle of attack came from MP 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗓𝗓 𝗦𝗨𝗕𝗦𝗓𝗏. He basically called the government's bill a shallow attempt to score some cheap political points with the public. He accused them of being careless with the law just to get a little boost in popularity.
Now, the opposition did try to find some middle ground here. They suggested a few changes, things like, hey, let's make this law only apply to future MPs, or maybe exempting people whose only income is that pension. But the government, nope, they weren't having any of it. They rejected the changes flat out.
But this whole fight wasn't just about pensions. Oh no. The opposition used this moment to really challenge the government on other huge issues. So next up, let's look at how they shifted the focus to the super serious topic of national security.
So how did they do this? Well, they used a really powerful tool in their toolkit. In parliamentary speak, it's called Standing Order 27-2. What it really is a way for any MP to stand up and demand immediate answers from the government on something urgent that the public cares about. It's a really key way to hold the government accountable.
And the questions they fired off using this rule, man, they were tough. They demanded to know what was happening with the recent shooting of a lawyer, why key police jobs were still sitting empty, and what the plan was to fight these powerful international criminal networks. These weren't just vague questions. They were specific, pointed, and designed to put the government on the spot.
All right, so from crime and justice, they pivoted again, this time to the economy. The opposition's scrutiny didn't stop, and next they put the entire nation's finances right under the microscope.
And some of these questions were, incredibly direct. For example, one MP got up and asked about the country's gold reserves, wanting to know if it was actual physical gold sitting in a vault or so-called paper gold, which is more of a financial instrument. It's a sharp question, designed to get at the real health of the nation's assets.
Then there was the whole issue of taxes. This was a huge sticking point. The opposition really hammered the government for putting new taxes on 60 essential goods. They argued this goes directly against promises to lower the cost of living and just makes life harder for regular people.
And the digging didn't stop there. The opposition also started targeting these big state-owned companies. They brought up allegations of corruption in buying coal for a major power plant. They demanded to know the total debt of the national airline, SriLankan Airlines, and they asked to see the audit reports for all of its other little companies.
So after a whole week of these intense clashes over pensions, security, and the economy, what does it all mean? Let's try and pull all these threads together and see the bigger picture of what was really going on in Parliament. Look, at the end of the day, whether you're talking about pensions or crime or the national airline, what this week really showed us was a parliamentary opposition doing its job. The main theme wasn't just this one bill. It was the constant, relentless act of challenging, questioning, and demanding that the government in power be held accountable.
And that really leaves us with this big question, right? When we see all these heated debates and these constant clashes, it's so easy to just write it off as political chaos or dysfunction. But you have to ask yourself, is this a sign that the system is broken? Or is this intense and, sometimes messy clash of ideas exactly how a democracy is supposed to work? Definitely something to think about.